I worked private security contracts for about 6 years after leaving the military. Most of the jobs were boring industrial sites nobody cared about. Refineries, storage depots, research facilities waiting for demolition. The kind of places companies technically still owned but didn't want to spend real money maintaining. Easy work if you could tolerate isolation. The last contract I took was at a decommissioned chemical research facility somewhere in eastern Kazakhstan. I'm not giving the exact location because I genuinely don't know if the place officially exists anymore. On paper, it had been abandoned since the early 2000s after some kind of containment incident forced evacuation of the underground sectors. The company handling cleanup went bankrupt years later, and eventually the government outsourced perimeter security to contractors. That's where I came in. The facility was enormous. Most of it sat above ground. Rusting industrial buildings, collapsed storage tanks, empty laboratories stripped clean decades ago. But the important sections were underground. 9 sectors connected through reinforced access tunnels beneath the main compound. Only the upper 2 sectors were considered safe for limited maintenance access. Everything below that had supposedly been sealed permanently after the evacuation. That was the official story anyway. When I arrived, the supervisor running orientation spent more time explaining where not to go than teaching actual procedures. Certain corridors were off limits. Certain elevators no longer existed. Certain doors were never to be opened even if alarms activated behind them. I remember joking that it sounded like the setup to a horror movie. Nobody laughed. There were only 6 of us rotating security shifts across the whole property. Most nights involved driving perimeter routes, checking fence sensors, and monitoring old surveillance systems from the administration building. Half the cameras barely worked, and the other half looked like they were held together with electrical tape and luck. The strange thing was how much power the site still consumed. For a place supposedly abandoned, the underground grid stayed fully active 24 hours a day. Backup generators cycled regularly too. When I asked why, another contractor named Petrov told me the underground ventilation systems could never be shut off completely. I asked what they were ventilating 15 years after evacuation. He just shrugged and changed the subject. The first weird incident happened during my second week. I was reviewing camera feeds around 3 a.m. when lights suddenly activated in Sector 9. That immediately got my attention because Sector 9 wasn't supposed to have power anymore. The camera itself only showed a concrete access corridor leading toward a sealed blast door. No movement, no visible people, just fluorescent lights flickering on one section at a time deep underground. I assumed it was electrical malfunction until the motion sensors activated too, one by one, like something was walking through the corridor. I called it in over radio expecting someone else to panic, but the supervisor sounded more annoyed than concerned. He told me to log it as false activation caused by legacy wiring. Then he ordered me not to send maintenance down there. That part bothered me immediately. If the systems were malfunctioning, why avoid checking them? The next night it happened again. Same corridor, same lights. Only this time the camera caught movement. A person walked past the far end of the hallway for maybe 2 seconds. White protective coveralls, full respirator mask, carrying what looked like a clipboard. I replayed the footage 6 or 7 times because I genuinely thought maybe it was another guard screwing around underground. But there was a problem. The timestamp showed the movement occurred inside a section sealed since 2011. I checked access logs afterward. No doors had opened. No elevator movement registered. According to the system, nobody had entered the underground sectors at all. That's when I started asking questions the older contractors clearly didn't want to answer. Petrov finally admitted the facility had never been fully abandoned. According to him, small maintenance crews still occasionally worked below ground under government oversight. He claimed they rotated in secretly every few months to inspect storage systems. I asked why none of us were informed about that. He said, because then you start wondering what they're maintaining. After that conversation, I started paying closer attention during overnight shifts. The underground activity became impossible to ignore. Lights turning on in sealed sectors, motion detections at impossible hours, elevator systems activating even though the shafts to lower sectors had supposedly been filled with concrete years earlier. Sometimes entire sections of the surveillance grid would briefly come online despite being listed as permanently offline in maintenance records. The footage itself was always strange too, not dramatic. That's the part that got under my skin. Just ordinary-looking workers moving through underground corridors like the facility was operating normally. Men and women in protective gear carrying equipment cases or pushing carts, occasionally stopping to talk to each other outside rooms that officially no longer existed. No panic. No urgency. Just people calmly working underground in a place everyone above ground insisted was empty. One night I decided to check the archive room myself. Most records on-site were physical because the digital systems kept failing. Buried inside old maintenance binders, I found evacuation reports from the original incident. Large sections had been removed entirely, but one detail kept appearing repeatedly. Sector 9 remains active. Not contaminated, not unstable, active. That wording stuck in my head immediately. A few nights later, I finally saw something directly instead of through cameras. I was doing a perimeter sweep near one of the sealed freight entrances around 2 a.m. when I noticed light coming from beneath the blast door. Not emergency lighting either. Bright white industrial lights moving underneath like people were working inside. I approached close enough to hear noise on the other side. Voices. Metal equipment moving. Distant machinery humming. It sounded like a fully operational facility beneath the ground. Then I heard someone cough directly behind the door. Not a weird monster sound or anything dramatic, just an exhausted human cough. That honestly scared me more than anything else up to that point. I radioed the supervisor immediately and told him there were definitely people below ground. There was a long silence before he responded. Then he asked me one question. Did they notice you? I remember standing there confused because that wasn't remotely the response I expected. Before I could answer, the lights beneath the door shut off instantly. Complete silence followed. No voices, no machinery, nothing. The supervisor ordered me back to administration immediately afterward. When I returned, he was already waiting in the monitoring room looking genuinely nervous. He told me never to approach Sector 9 entrances again under any circumstances. I asked him directly who was down there. He said, people who were never evacuated. That answer messed me up for days. According to the official incident timeline, everyone assigned to lower sectors either escaped during the chemical leak or died during containment failure. But after hearing activity below ground firsthand, I started wondering if some crew had been sealed inside intentionally. The security footage got worse after that. Entire groups of workers started appearing on camera regularly. Sometimes 20 or 30 people moving through underground checkpoints. Some footage showed cafeteria areas operating normally. Others showed laboratory rooms active with equipment. The timestamps were always current. One recording even showed a janitor mopping a hallway beneath Sector 9 while music played faintly through ceiling speakers, like an ordinary workday underground. I copied several clips onto a personal drive because by then I knew nobody would believe me otherwise. 3 days later, the files vanished from the drive completely. Not corrupted, deleted. Around that same time, I started noticing another detail in the footage. None of the workers ever looked directly at the cameras. At first, that sounds meaningless, but think about it. People naturally glance toward visible security cameras constantly without realizing it, especially in industrial facilities. These people never did, not once. Then came the incident that finally made me quit. I was alone in the monitoring room during night rotation when every underground camera activated simultaneously. All 9 sectors, corridors, laboratories, storage rooms, dormitories, places that were supposed to be abandoned 15 years earlier were fully lit and operational. Hundreds of people moved through the facility, workers talking, security personnel walking patrol routes, scientists reviewing monitors. It looked like the evacuation had never happened. Then every person on every camera stopped moving at exactly the same time. Not gradually, instantly. The entire underground facility froze. Every single person turned toward the nearest camera simultaneously. Even people who shouldn't have known where the cameras were positioned. I remember sitting there unable to move while dozens of camera feeds showed motionless workers staring directly outward. Then one of them smiled. Not exaggerated or creepy. Just a tired-looking middle-aged man in a lab coat smiling faintly into the camera like he recognized someone. A second later, every feed cut to black. The lights inside the monitoring room flickered off briefly. Then I heard elevator alarms activating somewhere below the building. One by one. Sector 4, Sector 5, Sector 6, descending upward toward the surface. I grabbed my things and left before the elevators reached ground level. I didn't even finish the shift. About a month later, I tried contacting Petrov to ask what was really inside Sector 9. His number had been disconnected. Another contractor I knew claimed the facility had been permanently demolished shortly after I left. But last year, I found something online that brought everything back. A satellite image uploaded to a mapping forum. The facility was still there. And in the middle of the compound, one section of snow had melted completely above the underground sectors, like something beneath the ground was still generating heat.